Okay. Okay. I will focus my presentation on giving you some history or some background about the SCORE network and the activities we are doing related to the estimation of illicit drugs consumption using wastewater-based epidemiology. And then I will cover some current applications and future perspectives. The first idea of measuring illicit drugs in wastewater to assess or to estimate the consumption goes back to 2001, and it was by Christian Doughton. Then later, a few years later, we at the Mario Negri Institute in Milan, we started working on this topic, and we implemented the application for the first time. We searched the main metabolite of cocaine, which is benzoyl-agonine, and we tried to estimate the consumption of cocaine. Later, we enlarged the panel of illicit drugs we were working with to amphetamines, methamphetamine, cannabis, and so on. Meanwhile, no, in the same, this is something Robert has already covered, but this approach was since the beginning very important attention, because it has the ability to provide the objective data that for illicit drugs is quite important, because from other epidemiological sources we can't have objective data. Then we can follow the trends, the changing trends in almost real time. We can study and design specifically the studies, so we can ideally investigate each wastewater treatment plant we have in our country, and so it is a very flexible instrument. And of course we can have qualitative and quantitative data, so we can see which substances are used and how much of these substances are used in a community. So it is very important to identify and study the profiles of use and assess the spatial and temporal trends, so in particular to highlight the changing trends. From 2005 to 2010, lots of groups in Europe started working on this topic. As you can see here are some of the main publications in that period related to the monitoring of illicit drugs in wastewater in a very wide panel of countries. And so in September 2010, me and Kevin Thomas from the Norwegian Institute of Water Research met in a conference, and he suggested to establish a group to work together on this topic. Kevin was able to start with the first meeting in Dublin in 2010 in December, and we started our network that was later called SCORE. And we had the possibility to perform the first monitoring campaign in March 2011. The network in the beginning was made up of 8 European research institutes and was supported since the beginning by the European Monitoring Center for Drugs and Drug Addiction. Our main aims were to organize the first a Europe-wide monitoring in different cities, established a common best practice protocol. So we started working to make data comparable and reliable. And for doing this, we of course perform also interlaboratory studies to check the reliability of the analysis of these substances. This is the first publication we got from the Europe monitoring. In the first year, we already had the participation of 11 countries and 19 cities. And here you have a map, and we for the first time we could assess some interesting profiles of drug use that were quite different in the different countries. So, for instance, we had a higher cocaine consumption in the Netherlands, in Spain, and in Belgium. And at the same time, for instance, in Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Norway, and Finland, and in Czech Republic, we had a low consumption of cocaine. And if we have a look here to the profile of amphetamine and the methamphetamine use, we had exactly the same. So Scandinavian countries and Czech Republic had in this case the higher consumption. And this was the first monitoring. Then, of course, the network was very successful, and we have to thank all people who, since the beginning, wanted to participate, and they start joining our network. So in a few years, we were able to analyze 42 cities, and we had a second publication. And this time, this publication was focused on assessing the temporal trends. So, as you can see, in each city, we could also see how were the trends. So we had, in some cases, an increase in consumption. This is benzoylecgonine, so it means it reflects the consumption of cocaine. And in other cases, a decreasing of consumption. Then the network has grown again, and we arrived beyond Europe in Australia, New Zealand, Asia, South America, Martinique, and also United States and Canada and Middle East. And this is the most updated data set we had published in 2020. And you have already seen this result. This map, we were able to assess the spatial trends, so the spatial, the different profiles of the different drugs used in Europe. And you have already seen with Robert that in Scandinavia, in Finland and Sweden, we had the prevalence of amphetamine use, while in Czech Republic and in the East Europe, we had the prevalence of methamphetamine use, and in the other countries, it was cocaine that was the prevalent drug. Related to other countries, we had the prevalence of methamphetamine use in Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, and also United States and Canada, while in Colombia and Martinique, it was prevalent the cocaine. On the other side, we could also assess in cities that were monitoring for more than 1 year, of course, we could assess the change in the consumption, so an increase or decrease of the use of each substance. This is the case again of benzoylecgonine. Then where we are now, so the network is increasing, again has increased in the last year, and in 2020 we had 100 cities monitored with 114 STPs, and we were and almost 40 labs were involved. So where we have this network that is open, everyone can join. We have a website, and we are now building a new website and a new platform for data collection. So it is interesting how we can enlarge our monitoring and enlarge, therefore, the information we can get applying wastewater-based epidemiology. So, of course, the first question we were asking ourselves was about the reliability of data and how this data could be therefore integrated with epidemiological information. We tried to identify all the gaps and uncertainties related to each step of wastewater-based epidemiology. As Luberto's already said before, we started from sampling, then the stability of biomarkers, so the metabolites we are analyzing in wastewater, the analysis, of course, and then the procedure we used to estimate drugs and to normalize to the population. So we tried to establish which is the best protocol to minimize or control these uncertainties and therefore improve the method. The first best practice protocol was published in 2013, was developed in 2013, and we are improving it and updating it right now. We of course perform also interlaboratory studies, but Robert has already told you about this, and I will just show you some results of this. This is a paper from 2008 covering the first years of interlaboratory studies, and as you can see, we had the satisfactory results since the beginning, and for some substances along the years we could improve the performance. For instance, for cannabis, methamphetamine, and 6-monoacetylmorphine, which is the main metabolite of heroin. How these data are used every year? The EMCDDA is publishing all this information from Europe, of course, in their website, and you can have an overlook. You can also play with data because you have main substances: cocaine, cannabis, amphetamine, and methamphetamine, and MDMA, and then you can choose how to see the data. You can have just this kind of graph, or otherwise you can have a map, and you can see how each substance is used in Europe. You can select the year, and you can also select if you want to see a weekday consumption or a weekend consumption, because for most of these substances we have an increase of consumption during the weekend. EMCDDA is also publishing this, including this data in their European drug report every year. So wastewater-based epidemiology, or data from wastewater, are considered now by EMCDDA an additional indicator of drug use, that they are using it. They are merging this information with the other indicators that they collect all over Europe. Since a few years, also the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime use our information in their World Drug Report. And finally, we got we prepared the data repository with all the data from 2011-2017 from the SCORE network, not including only Europe, but all the information we have for worldwide. So I believe that this is a great achievement, because in this case, wastewater-based epidemiology is now recognized as an additional tool, epidemiological tool, and data are really integrated in the epidemiological information available. Coming to the question we had, we of course used wastewater-based epidemiology to assess how the consumption of illicit drugs has changed during the COVID-19 pandemic. And EMCDDA asked us to collect some information, and they included this information in a report they published this year in April, merging the information from wastewater with the other epidemiological information like drug market, drug services, and prisons, and so on. For wastewater analysis, from data from wastewater, we could collect information from 58 cities and 18 countries in Europe, and we assessed the consumption of cocaine, changes in consumption of cocaine, amphetamine, methamphetamine, MDMA, cannabis, and also alcohol. We consider the pre-lockdown period, that was 2019, the year before, or early 2020, then the lockdown period in 2020, the first and hard lockdown we had, and then a post-lockdown period. Of course, this is affected as well to periodic and local lockdowns we had in the different countries. Anyway, we could assess several changes, like in this case, this is benzoylecgonine. We had a decrease in 16 cities, and in the lockdown period, with 7 cities where we had a slight increase and 5 cities with no change. And in the period after the first lockdown, we had again an increase of cocaine consumption. This is for amphetamine, and more or less we had the same pattern of consumption. Finally, we are using in different countries the wastewater-based epidemiology to assess long-term changes. This is an example we had in Milan. We were monitoring cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine consumption since 2005. And from 2008 to 2009, we had really a drop of about 50% of cocaine use and also heroin. While in the same time, we assessed an increase of methamphetamine use. We were investigating different issues, different potential factors, and finally we discovered that it was the economic crisis. So consumers were stopping the use of expensive drugs to use less expensive drugs as methamphetamine. This is another study in Italy, a national one, and we could see the profile of use of different substances in over 5 years. Going to other examples, this is in Belgium, an example from Belgium. They assessed the stimulant use in the period 2011-2015, and we have, in this case, we have the proportion of doses, in this case of cocaine, amphetamine, and so on. It is nice, interesting to see, for instance, Brussels. You have a prevalence of cocaine use, so a high proportion of cocaine doses over the total use of drugs, and very low consumption, for instance, of amphetamine use. And in other cities, you have the opposite, for instance, in this case. So it is nice to see how you can assess the spatial profile, so the different pattern of use even within a country in different cities. And also an example from Australia, which is quite interesting, because in the last years they found out a marked increase of methamphetamine consumption, while, for instance, cocaine consumption was quite stable. So in this case, wastewater-based epidemiology was like an early warning system to assess, to identify the emergence of a new dangerous profile of drug use. So I come to the conclusions and briefly the future perspectives of these applications. We have seen how wastewater, since it is collecting the metabolic residues of all the substances we consume and absorbed, is very suitable to for monitoring of specific metabolites of illicit drugs, and starting from this measurement to estimate the consumption. And we have seen, as Robert told before, that we can apply the same process, the same method to a different kind of substances, and it was done quite successfully.
Sara, 5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's just the last slide. So we can assess a panel of human habits, not only illicit drug use, but also alcohol, tobacco use, and also we can investigate different kind of patterns related to human health, or for instance, the exposure to different contaminants. And we do this by a quantitative analysis of specific metabolites in raw wastewater. The approach is nice and useful because it can give objective and updated information on human habits. And in the specific case of illicit drugs, but also in other cases, the results can complement epidemiological studies, and we have seen that for illicit drugs we have several good and nice, interesting examples now. We can identify the use of new substances, or maybe the changing pattern profile of use. And then this is not really implemented by now, but wastewater-based epidemiology has also the potential to assess the efficacy, for instance, of preventive campaigns or dissuasive campaigns, and so it can be. This is something for maybe for the future. Because it can be very useful also to be used in this field. So I would like to acknowledge the SCORE core group and also the entire SCORE network. So all people that joined the network all over the world, and they provided information, they provided data every year, and of course the projects. I just included here some of the projects thanks to which we could perform our activity in the last years. And thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Sara. So now we have time, another 15 minutes for short discussion. Please submit your questions by chat. In the meantime, while people are thinking about the questions, I have one general issue for you. I think it's interesting for discussion, for general knowledge of the people. It seems that this approach is already well consolidated for illicit drugs, and it seems that maybe it's everything done. So just applying the approach to different populations. But my question is, if we have still challenges for these drugs. Of course, we have the new drugs, the MPS, that this is a real challenge, but I'm talking about the conventional drugs, let's say cocaine, amphetamines, heroin, etc. I know, for example, in the reports, normally there are no data of cannabis. This can be surprising for the people that don't work in this area, because why not? Cannabis is there, it's so popular. And I know that there are problems with cannabis, and you know also, you both know, and there are also problems, some problems with heroin. So I would like that you talk a little bit about what do you think about these compounds, of the challenge we still have for these, let's say, conventional illicit drugs.
Yeah, that's true. We are applying this, but we have some problems, of course. And the first one is the one you mentioned for heroin, for instance. To apply this methodology, we have quite strict requirements to choose the proper biomarkers. So they should be, of course, measurable in wastewater, but also stable in wastewater, because we can't lose the compound we are going to measure. And in the case of, and then of course we can't have additional sources than a human metabolism. So we have some requirements. So not all the metabolites and all the substances are suitable for wastewater-based epidemiology. And in the case of heroin, we have a main metabolite of heroin, which is morphine. But morphine is also used in therapeutic, as a therapeutic drug. So on the other side, we have 6-monoacetylmorphine, which is a specific metabolite of heroin, but it has a very low metabolism. So it is excreted in very low percentage. And moreover, it is not stable in wastewater. So 6-monoacetylmorphine is not a suitable biomarker. A suitable biomarker is morphine, but for morphine, you should have the therapeutic amount. You should correct your information for the amount used as a therapeutic drug. So this is why heroin is not considered in Europe-wide studies, because it is difficult to have for each country or each city the assessment of the amount of morphine used as a therapeutic drug. So this is the reason. And related to cannabis, we are working on this, but we have some analytical issues related to the fact that cannabis is also a bit lipophilic, and it has anyway fecal excretion. So we are losing something because it is not in the water phase, but maybe in the particulate. And moreover, during the procedure, the entire procedure we are using with SPE, we are probably losing some cannabis. So we are working in a current project. Maybe Roberto can say, Hubertus can say a bit more, because you are working on this specifically to improve the reliability of measurement. So actually, cannabis, the analysis of the main metabolite of cannabis is good to assess the trends in a city or in a country where a laboratory is doing so the temporal trends, but it is less reliable to compare information from different countries. I don't know if Robert want to add.
Yes, I think